Hey, psyc100 students, this is chapter 9, development, lifespan. Ooh, volume 2, and I think we're just going to have 2 videos for this one too. So hopefully you enjoy both of them and pay attention, and I'll give you the answers towards the end. We're talking about development, the process of development. And so here we have little baby rolling around, baby sitting without helps from their friend, baby holding on to things, starting to make their way around the world walking, and then you see the last child playing with blocks. Joseph's tip for the day: good gift to give to little ones. Make sure they're sanitized, make sure they're made out of wood, wooden blocks, make sure that it's not from the last tree from the Lorax. But wooden blocks, of course, are educational. They have numbers, there's shapes, there's colors, there's letters. Kids like to build things. Other kids like to be like Godzilla and knock things down. They'll last a lifetime. I see them at the flea markets all the time where people will buy them. If you look in the psych lab, you'll see my name spelled in wooden blocks. Very handy, right? So talk about this gentleman right here. I kind of gave you a hint as to the gender. When I show this picture, a lot of people see a woman, they see a man, they see Sasquatch, they see an ape, they see a lot of things, but it's actually a fellow by the name of Conrad Lorenz, and he's guiding some baby geese. They're not ducklings, they're goslings. And he's demonstrating something called imprinting. And with imprinting, we get this notion, at least Lorenz speculated, that with certain animals, the first object that they see moving when they're just born, they're going to imprint on that object. It's kind of like human beings. When you were born, who would they hand you to? Well, for some of you, they handed you first to a team that did a little spit polish, cleaned you up, and then handed you to your mom. Why to your mom? Your mom wanted to find out what she just went through 9 months giving birth to you. She wanted to hold you up like a trophy. Kunta Kinte, right? If dad hadn't run away or hadn't fainted, he got to hold you too. Newsflash, some of you were placed in a little box for additional cooking, not a microwave, incubator, and you weren't handed immediately to your parents. Whereas the goslings, if Conrad Lorenz wasn't there right when they hatched, they wouldn't have imprinted on him. With people, it's a different story, obviously, because some of us, even though we weren't handed immediately to our parents, we still bonded with them. As a matter of fact, we're bonded with some folks that may have helped raise us in our development, and so not so set in stone. Who is this gentleman, and what is he doing? Well, it's Jean Piaget, and Jean Piaget is telling those kids, yes, I am your father. No, he's not saying that. He's telling those kids, sniff this glue and you'll be like my friend, Wandering Tommy. No, he's not saying that. If you recall, Jean Piaget, representative of the cognitive perspective from the first chapter, if you recall. And he started off life very interesting. He started off life with an interest in zoology and gets his doctorate in zoology at age 21. I didn't even start college until I was 21. This guy's done with it. He's the fella, if you recall, at age 9 wrote an article that was published and was offered a job, even though he was just a kid. The person who read the article thought an adult had written it. He goes on to have an amazing career, have some kids with his wife, and he had an incredible ability to notice detail, incredible detail. And of course, he comes up with the cognitive stage theory, where he has kids, through the observation of his own kids and in others, start to sense their thinking. That's why he's a cognitive perspective person. Their thinking starts with senses, and then they start to represent things with words, and then they become more concrete, and then finally formal, operational. This theory, when reviewed by Albert Einstein, Einstein's comment to this theory is that this theory was so simple that only a genius could have thought it up. I love that compliment. Considering the source, it really is a compliment. He talks about how kids obtain the skill of conservation. The quantity remains constant. So you have the girl examining the Kool-Aid, and they're the same amount, and then we change the container of the Kool-Aid, and she has not acquired the cognitive skill of conservation, then she'll quickly believe that the green one has more because it's taller or bigger. We actually did this experiment with some students some years ago for Kindercaminata, which unfortunately we may not have this year because of all the happenings. But my students did the Kool-Aid test, and 98.6% of all kindergartners said that the green one had more. And they were exactly what we expect them to be. There's nothing wrong with those kids. Lev Vygotsky from Russia argued that kids we as human beings process information a little bit different with Jean Piaget. Rather in stages, the best way to develop thinking, you might want to keep this in mind if you have siblings or cousins or neighbor kids around, is through what he called guided participation, right? This notion of the zone of proximal development. Vygotsky says, if you want to teach a kid how to tie their shoes, don't give them a manual and say, read this and I'll get back to you in a week, right? Show them and then have them do it themselves. Hands-on stuff, apprenticeships, mentorships. My cousin, Pete, in Arizona, how did he become a plumber? Well, of course he took classes, but he worked under a master plumber to watch and then do. And once you do, it becomes the norm. My colleague showed me how to make YouTube videos. I had no clue. Never really watched a lot of YouTube videos. Certainly never constructed one. She showed me. She had me do it. I messed up a few times. Voila, I figured it out. Now, second case study I want to talk about is this man right here, Erik Erikson. Take a good look. Can you tell me which one is Erik Erikson? Okay, I'm kidding. It's the person below in blue. Now, further proof that the more time you spend with somebody, the more you start to morph into that person. Be honest. Think about your partner, that long-term relationship you had in the past 2 weeks, and how the two of you melded into each other. What did Erikson do? Well, a little background about Erik, son of Erik. First of all, his last name is not Erikson originally. His last name was Hamburg. Little Erik was born out of wedlock. We got a telenovela going here. We got a Korean soap opera going here. His mother became pregnant when having an affair with a married man. She told the man that she was pregnant with his baby, and he said, "Who are you?" So she's raising poor baby Erik by herself. She takes him into a doctor's appointment. Doctor's eyes meet mom's eyes, and the next thing you know, young Erik is getting all his appointments for free, if you can read between those lines. He gets adopted by this doctor. Doctor marries mom, adopts young Erik. He becomes Erik Hamburg. Beautiful. End of story. Not the end of story, right? Erik is interested in being an artist. He's got some skills. I've seen some of his art. It's pretty good. So he travels around Europe. His parents support him. They give him money. If you want to see art, go around the world. Go around Europe. You'll see art in every freaking corner. Museums galore. In his travels, he runs into Anna Freud. Anna Freud is the daughter of Sigmund. She's got a school going on, and she needs an artist. He agrees to work for her, but she has a condition. You have to meet my father, and you have to be psychoanalyzed. Once that happens, it changes his destiny. That happens to us sometimes. We have an idea, we have a major, and something will happen, and it'll change our destiny. So he develops the psychosocial development theory. And his argument is that things that happen to us can affect us later in life. If you recall that commercial or that cartoon from the first video, how those two fellows were talking about their early experiences changing them, whether they're a raccoon, etc. Well, here we have Erikson's psychosocial development theory. Talks about how our development is forever changed based on crises, and we either get through these crises or we don't, right? And that alters what kind of person we are For example, the first one being trust versus mistrust. When we're infants, either we're cared for very well and we develop a sense of trust, or we're not cared for very well, or we're neglected, and that forms a sense of mistrust. So how does he get the last name of Erickson? The Nazis move in Austria, and they're looking for two groups of people, Jewish people and psychoanalysts. Guess what? He meets both criteria. And young Eric, with his wife Helen, decide we better get out of Dodge. So they leave the country and they move to the United States, where even though he hasn't gone to college, doesn't speak English, he establishes himself as a premier therapist for children using his theories adopted from psychoanalysis. So quite a successful immigrant story, with the exception of our native peoples. We're all immigrants to this country. We forget that sometimes. So, morality. How do we become the moral people that we are? Well, Lawrence Kohlberg would argue it starts very basic. I'll take the cookies if nobody's watching me, or I won't because I know my mom counts them. Conventional, the first one was pre-conventional. Conventional is when we're teenagers and we do what our friends recommend, right? We follow the group. And then finally, it's post-conventional. That's the highest level of morality, where our morals are set in stone and we're forever solidified into the way we're thinking, right? So, it's time for the review. What do I want you to know to write for the essay answers? Hopefully, we'll be back and you'll have the standard exams, but in case we're not, these would be the questions for exam 3, the first two questions. The first two questions deal with the story I told about the object that was important to me from the video 1, and that's the toy story. So I want you to tell me everything you remember about the item I showed you, and why are items, objects, toys, whatever, in general, important to some of our development. This is an opinion part, the second part. The second one is to describe the story of Erik Erikson and his theory. And one thing I didn't mention about Erik Erikson was that when he was growing up, he was raised as a Jew, as I mentioned, and since he had a different father, he was very tall and lanky and blonde-haired and blue-eyed. And so when he went to school with German kids and Jewish kids, the German kids didn't want to play with him because he was a Jew. And the Jewish kids didn't want to play with him because he looked German. So you can see that his own crisis of development started even when he was in school. I mean, starting off with an illegitimate child, and then not being accepted by his peers. So you can see again, and this is why I tell you the background of a lot of these theorists, how their backgrounds seem to influence their way of thinking. Now, the last thing I want to mention to you, this is after the fact, and I want you to know that I'm not selling this product at all, but this is called the Chatter Translator, and it's to help with relationships. And since we're all penned up inside, the Chatter Translator, if we're asked by our partners a question and we blow the answer, it'll give you the correct answer. So let me give you some examples. For example, if a person asks you, do I look fat? How are you supposed to answer that? Oh yeah, shouldn't you be in San Diego right now at SeaWorld? Of course not. Correct answer is, do I look fat? Absolutely not. If anything, you look skinnier, if that's even possible. That's worth the purchase of the Chatter Translator right there. Sometimes your partner will catch you looking at another female. Is that girl pretty? What are you supposed to say? Yeah, can I trade? No. Correct response is, she's okay, I guess, but she's nothing like you. Good one. Women, tell me the truth. This happens. This haircut looks awful, doesn't it? Right after you get a haircut. What are you supposed to say? Yeah, who cut it? Edward Scissorhands? No, of course not. The correct response is, no, it really brings out your eyes. Now, if she doesn't have eyes, then mention something else. The last one is, and I've heard this question myself, if I died, would you get remarried? What am I supposed to say? Yeah, well, me and my new woman will be dancing on your graveside before you're even cold. Of course not. The correct answer is, that's impossible to answer. I can't imagine living without you. Chatter translator. Yes, definitely worth the purchase. Take care all. Enjoy your day.